The power of King Kong's story has never wavered, but the content of King Kong has taken many forms since production started in 1932. Scenes have come and gone, been lost and found, driven by a variety of forces: budgetary, creative, political. Some of the most damaging changes took place 5 years after King Kong premiered.
In 1938, when King Kong was re-released, the Production Code Administration was concerned.
The peeling off of Fay Wray's clothes was considered a partial rape or something, and sniffing her clothes was not considered good taste.
Some idiot in an office deems that this is too risque for audiences to see all of a sudden, even though it's existed in that form.
They basically took their scissors out and said, you know, what worked in 1933, well, we're much more sophisticated today, and we don't think the public should see this stuff.
Chiefly, they were concerned about the violence implications in the film.
There were scenes about, he knocks these two natives off the wall with a stick and then picks one up and puts it in his mouth.
I love seeing Kong bite the guy's head off. Oh my God, he's stomping at that guy and grinding him into the ground. It's a big, scary monster. I mean, why not?
And there's also that horrifying sequence when he's looking for a Fay Wray in the building and he grabs another lady.
It's about, 4.5 minutes of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there that was cut out of the movie. Thought to be lost for years, for decades.
That footage became sort of one of the cinematic holy grails.
For a long time, the 1938 censored version was the only thing that survived.
And then, amazingly, it was discovered, I think in the 60s, that the guy who edited those scenes out took them home. Thank God. He took them home, and sometime later he found the footage, sold it to somebody else, and it was eventually reinstated into the film.
And so for a while, the only way to see the censored shots was to look at a grainy, scratchy 16mm version of them edited into a 35mm film, so they sort of jumped a little bit.
Of course, that's not the print that you're going to see here on this disc. Miraculously, this print was discovered in England, and the British censors did not take out their scissors like the American ones did, and so we have this beautiful, intact nitrate print.
The 29 censored shots from King Kong have been unearthed and restored to their rightful place in the film. But other missing scenes may never be found. The most famous is referred to by fans and experts alike as the spider pit sequence. It is said to have occurred between the time Kong drops the log into the chasm and the moment Jack Driscoll is attacked by the giant lizard.
In the movie, and as scripted, several of the sailors who fell off the log landed in this pit, and these disgusting insects and lizards came out and attacked the guys.
O'Brien is said to have felt it was his best piece of animation.
At the time of the film, Marion Cooper had said that the scenes were cut out because they were too shocking. But later on, Cooper revealed in a letter that the scenes were taken out because he admitted it stopped the story.
And it was probably burned. Cooper had been known to do that on other films where he didn't want film to be used.
The spider pit sequence remained virtually unknown for close to 30 years. Then, in the 1960s, a popular movie fan magazine published a fascinating photo.
The first time I ever saw a picture of the lost spider sequence was from a center spread in Forry Ackerman's famous Monsters of Filmland magazine, which celebrated monsters, and he used to regularly publish photos of King Kong.
Peter is, and has always been, sort of not just fascinated, but obsessed with the missing spider footage.
It's not just any old sequence. It's not like, some more shots of Kong walking through the jungle. It's a kind of a sequence which in itself sounds really cool.
I bet that scene is out there somewhere. I bet it's in some rusty film can in some vault or in some basement.
There's all sorts of tantalizing rumors, as I guess there is with any mythology. There's people that believe that a really detailed hunt through film archives in Asia might unearth it, because depending on exactly when the spider sequence was actually removed from the film, people are thinking, well, possibly it actually made it on board the ship to the Far East. Here we are, 30-odd years since I saw King Kong for the first time, and the spider sequence has yet to surface.
it almost seemed a natural progression for him to come in one day and say, hey, I've got this idea.
We thought it would be a lot of fun in the absence of somebody discovering the lost spider sequence to actually try to recreate the spider sequence, which would involve building miniatures, building stop-motion puppets, and then it would involve animating them.
To be told that we're going to have the opportunity to bring back to life these lost moments in cinema history was incredibly exciting.
Just as if we didn't have enough work doing our own King Kong, we're going to finish off the 1933 one.
And he was joking, because of course we're not finishing Kong 33, but it was a very romantic idea, and it really got everybody going.
Well, this is to ensure that the original spider footage will show up.
Yeah, exactly, because once you start on it, you know.
No, once we finish it.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's when it'll show up.
Yeah.
You know, the emphasis is on fun. I mean, I don't regard this exercise of recreating the spider scene as a serious historical piece of archaeology.
We never intended it to be inserted into the actual film. That's why we presented it as a separate little what-if excerpt from the film.
It's a group of Kong fans who have simply, you know, sat around thinking, wow, I wonder, you know, if the spider scene was ever found, what would you see? You know, we've tried to do our best, but it, again, most of it is guesswork. There is a few pieces of evidence relating to what the spider sequence would have looked like. The most valuable one is a fairly well-rendered painting, I think it's by Byron Crabb, which has what I would call a master shot of the insect pit taking place. And if you look at other pieces of art that he created for Kong, you can see from scenes that do survive today, you know, that they were quite faithful to his art. And then beyond that, there's a series of photographs that survive. There's a couple of very famous ones that really give you a feeling of what the scene looked like.
Now these are interesting photos. If you guys have never seen these are a treat, these bloody stills here, I'll tell you.
It was his Kong collection. Well, not his Kong collection, part of his Kong collection. And it was all this research material that he had collected together over the years.
Ah, now we're getting to the nitty-gritty, aren't we?
It was just this treasure trove of research.
So that's interesting. That's a little funny little lizardy creature. Oh, that's a good shot of the spider.
A couple of our guys are huge enthusiasts for the original film, and to watch their faces light up as they get to see these treasures was incredibly exciting.
Oh, look at there, look at there, look at there, look at there.
No, that's a mechanical spider designed by, what is that, Brian?
But does that mean stop-motion animation spider? I think so.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
That is one of the models right there, and a clear photo of it besides. Pretty much exactly, yeah.
We hold the secret to the spider pit in our own folders.
So basically we're armed with our drawings, our photographs, and the only other thing which, you know, certainly gave us a strong idea of what was intended as a script.
We did some detective work, and really we think that there were probably 5 creatures.
People call it the lost spider sequence, and obviously there was a big spider. There's a very clear photograph of him.
A crab creature, which is a combination between kind of a spider and a crab.
There's a tentacled octopus kind of creature. He's seen in the artwork, and he's also referenced in the screenplay.
Our 2-legged creature, which does appear in the film. Now, we had great reference for him because he's actually seen climbing up the vine towards Jack Driscoll.
And then there's another lizard who's sort of like a cross between a crocodile and a pig in a funny kind of way.
Peter brought in Richard Taylor and his team at Weta Workshop, who had done all the prosthetics, armor, weapons, and creature design on the Lord of the Rings films, to execute the creature design and building. And the designers there got to work right away.
What we started off by doing was sculpting design maquettes, exactly like we would for any job.
Because Peter really likes to work in 3D. He likes to see things that he can pick up and turn around.
What I'm doing right now is a maquette of one of the lizard creatures from the bottom of the ravine. This is the creature here that I'm trying to recreate right now. Basically, I'm just trying to sculpt it so that the sculpture I have creates the same light patterns and shapes as on the photograph. I think I'm getting pretty close.
With the designs complete, the next step was building armatures.
This here is the armature for what we're calling the tentacle bug. It's described in the original script as an insect with octopus-like arms, and it's pretty much all we had to go on. We've got base movement on the tentacles from the body. These will be animatable. Pretty cool looking creature.
Recreating the puppets that were built in the 1930s has been hard. We've tried to use an authentic technique to build these items, and that technique is quite foreign to our normal working style, so we have found it difficult.
The guys over there threw themselves into it, you know, with incredible passion, as they usually do, because they're all Kong fans. This was like the assignment of a lifetime. They're going to go recreate the unseen creatures from Kong.
What's the only thing cooler than working on a remake of King Kong? Working on the original King Kong.
To maintain authenticity, Jackson turned once again to the words of screenwriters Wallace, Rose, and Creelman. He hoped that by analyzing how the script had been translated into the final images on screen, he could do the same with the missing spider pit sequence.
Because what exists in terms of the screenplay of Kong, the original shooting script, is a fairly detailed description of the spider scene, because the script of Kong resembles almost like a shot list. You know, wide shot of, reverse angle on. It's not how, you know, you'd write a film script today.
Peter had Frank Darabont and Rick Baker over, not only great filmmakers themselves, but huge Kong fans. And they kind of watched the sequence and broke it down.
If you actually look at page 64, Rick, that is the lost spider scene. Whatever detail we have of it is on that page.
The men at the bottom of the ravine are attacked by giant insects who come out of caves and fissures to eat them. Yeah.
I mean, what we have to do, the first thing, which is kind of interesting, is to sort of identify which shots are in the movie. I think will be the simplest thing to do.
Yes.
And then that, obviously, by nature is going to make it easy for us because it'll identify the ones that they didn't use.
Yeah.
As we were starting to go through it and watch the film and compare the script to it, we saw, you know, it evolved into something else.
As a director, you're looking at it going, okay, well, if I'm going to be shooting this, and this, then that's how it should look like. And it's not at all what, what I'm seeing, you know, on screen.
So that's shot 2. So, yeah, good, this is good. Okay, now, let's just go back. So we've got 3 is 3, yep, okay, and 4 is back to 2. So 2 and 4, no, 5, no, 1 and 4.
Is there going to be a quiz after this?
Yeah, this is too much like hard work, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like
Oh, you reckon you're on a third? Yeah.
Dinosaur
okay.
approaches sailor who has climbed to the treetop. He shrieks in terror. Miniature man and tree.
That's a miniature
I
man
think
and
that's
tree.
that shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Isn't that tree the same one they used in The Most Dangerous Game?
It might be.
It kind of looks like it.
Good eye.
Yeah.
I actually thought this process was going to be simply about ticking off shots. I was going to think, oh yeah, that one's this one, and that one's this one, and that one's this one. But I've actually realised that even though somebody sat down and basically did a screenplay which is set out like a shot list, they ended up designing a shot like this, which sort of does about 6 shots all in one go.
Frank and Rick and Peter sitting down to watch the film kind of pointed to an interesting little discovery.
The spider pit sequence is not the only thing that was deleted from this area. In the sequence that leads up to the log chasm, the sailors are running crazily through the jungle onto the log where they're attacked by Kong, who shakes the log and throws them off. Now, I've always assumed they're just like running crazily from the swamp, and they're just... Originally, they apparently shot this chase with the sailors being pursued by an Arseniotherium. I guess Cooper's idea was that the sailors are chased onto the log, then Kong appears on the other side, and then they're stuck in the middle, and they've got this monster on one side and the gorilla on the other, and they can't go, and then they get shaken off. And then we came to realize that at some point they swapped the Arseniotherium and replaced him with a Styracosaur, which is a horned dinosaur.
The Styracosaur was originally planned for creation, but didn't make it in that, and then it was planned for King Kong, and it very well might have been shot.
There's a couple of stills that exist that you can see clearly it's on the other side of the log chasm, having, chased the sailors.
And then I believe the Styracosaur was cut out because nobody really cared what was chasing them on the other side, even though it does lead this kind of logical lapse, which is why.
Now, we're lucky enough to have the original puppet of the Styracosaur.
And Peter has kept it very, very well preserved.
Lift it out by its. Okay, lift the box away.
You get chills taking it out of the box because it's like, wow. This is one of Marcel Delgado's creations, one of Willis O'Brien's animations, and you're holding it in your hands, right?
It's actually lovely how well the head is preserved, because it shows you exactly the textures that they were using at the time.
So we decided, partly because, just having the original puppet and the fact that it also relates so closely to the spider pit sequence that we were doing, we thought we might just, reconstruct back a little bit further and maybe put some Styracosaur chase shots in as well. Again, just for fun. We couldn't use the original Styracosaur puppet, the one that was actually in the film, because the actual original puppet is fragile and a state of, terrible disrepair. So we decided that we would build a replica.
But that created a big dilemma for us because, well, we've got the armature as an exact reference, but we can't get at it because it's got all the rotted rubber on it. And you shouldn't take it off because in a way that would be destroying an artifact from the film.
So in order to find out how the puppet was constructed, we took it to the hospital.
And there's patients waiting for their x-rays, and the Styracosaur is waiting for his x-ray. And he got his x-ray, and sure enough, you throw up the x-rays, and boom, there's your skeleton.
There was amazing surprises when we saw the x-rays.
So that's interesting because you see the rib cage. Yeah. And you see the mesh.
The level of effort that had gone to create the breathing rib cage, for instance.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's like I would never. No one would ever actually know that. Wow. No one would ever know that.
The way that they had constructed the whole object, these massive pieces of aluminium that were used to assemble things like the backbone, were really delightful to discover.
Guided by the X-rays, Weta produced an exact replica of the original Styracosaur armature from the 30s.
These armatures are beautiful pieces of sculpture in their own right before you actually apply the puppet to the top of them. What I'd like you guys to do is begin a process of applying cotton wool in wraps. It's 11:30 now. I need the puppet back at 1 o'clock. This is more difficult than a computer-controlled animatronic puppet, so we take our hats off to Marcel Delgado. This has been a tricky one. We wanted to recreate it as exactly as we possibly could. One of the neat things that we did with the head was to actually scan the original head of Peter's puppet, and then in turn, using the scan, mill it out on a robotic routing table.
And of course, then once you get the rubber on, an artist has to come in and carefully dress it all to camera, create the skin texture and the bumps and the paint and all that kind of stuff. But by the time it was done, it was great.
Next, the Weta Workshop artisans tackled the tricky task of building exact replicas of several miniature environments from King Kong. The primary challenge came from trying to translate two-dimensional reference photographs into three-dimensional sets. By cutting the photos apart and mounting them on polystyrene shapes, the Weta crew was able to correctly determine how the original sets were arranged. With input from Peter Jackson, construction could begin.
They actually went in and built actual trees, palm trees, jungle foliage, ground plane foliage, moss.
With the miniature sets underway, only one missing element remained.
From the outset of this little project, Pete had always mentioned that he was going to try and shoot some live-action elements.
It's in the script that it calls for actual shots of live-action sailors.
It seemed to be clear from the script that there were 4 sailors that lived for a few more minutes, only to get devoured by giant insects, of course. A couple of photographs that we found definitely indicate that 2 sailors ended up on top of a rock with some sticks, improvised weapons, fending off some of these creatures. And so that was a very important clue, and it's really, those 2 guys on top of the rock is the little spine that we built our sequence around.
One of the first things we had to do before we shot a frame is we had to storyboard. Storyboard is basically the script of the film in comic book form, in panels which describe the composition and action. So okay, that's what our frame's gonna look like.
Just thinking about what we're gonna see in the background, you see, we may as well, to make it nice and fruity, it would be good if we
It would be good if we saw a piece of the rock in the background.
In keeping with this being really a fan project, we didn't cast actors.
We got some volunteers, mainly from Weta Workshop, to portray the sailors.
And in fact, they were the Weta crew that had been building these props and environments.
We went and picked all the guys that could look kind of 1930s, who had the right look or hairstyle.
And we set about shooting some live action plates and shot them very much in the style of 1933.
Especially in that 1930s kind of acting style too. You'd want to be.
And so it was a weekend, I remember, and Peter came out and directed a shoot.
And then you pick up your sticks like you're going to defend yourself, looking at the monster still.
It was a blast because you came out, you got dressed up as a crew of the Venture, you got killed by imaginary monsters.
Monster!
You were directed by Peter Jackson.
Action!
If you had to work on a Sunday, that was the kind of thing you wanted to be doing.
And cut. Okay, let's just try one last one for luck.
We shot a few insert shots of our sailors being pursued by the Styracosaur through the trees, so that we ended up with the same dynamic as what they had originally intended, where the sailors are trapped between a rock and a hard place.
Go back, the Styracosaur! Go back to Kong!
We didn't have the luxury of just shooting a bunch of live action elements and seeing if it works and reshooting it and so on and so forth. We kind of had to go get it. So the idea we had is, well, wait a minute. Graham's going to be animating the squid creature. We need a live action sailor interaction with the creature. So if Graham knows the performance of the creature, he should be our live action actor because he knows exactly what that creature's going to do, which put him in the very strange position of being devoured or killed by his own animation.
All the tentacles pull him in towards the mouth. A grisly death. Somebody's got to do it.
If I had time, I would have loved to have done a stop-motion shot for our reconstruction, but unfortunately I just didn't have time to do that. But we did end up with 3 or 4 really good animators who are basically having the time of their lives, I think.
The last thing I expected was to come to New Zealand and work on stop motion, and let alone the original Kong.
It was pretty cool when we finally got everything up and running. We had, at the peak of production, 4 animation tables. Don would be animating the Styracosaur on one table, while Graham would be animating one of the spider creatures on another table, and the other 2 were setting up. You'd look out the window and you'd go, man, we're doing a stop-motion animated film King Kong style.
It's like a time machine going back and doing it the way they would have done it back then as much as possible.
I always used to greet people on set and I'd say, hey, welcome back to 1932.
I've been using the computer for so long, I'd forgotten how much fun it could be to go back to miniatures and puppets that you can hold that are tangible, and I was right into it. This is just after the guys have fallen into the bottom of the pit, and we've got the spider emerging from a cave in about 30 frames, a little over a second, which is the first storyboard frame here. And he'll head straight into the camera, a real scuttle, so nice and scary, and come up big in frame, like our second board here. And we'll do a big hold on that close-up of mandibles going and salivating. The whole lot's going to take about just under 5 seconds, the whole shot. First second's taken about 2 hours. Been a little bit tricky because of the confines of the cave, but once he's out in the clear, hopefully it'll pick up a bit.
Our other animator, Don Waller, his challenge was he had to animate the Styracosaur and the 2-legged lizard, and the 2-legged lizard was manageable. It had to climb up a wall, which was sort of a challenge. But the Styracosaur, he had a tough time because that thing was big and awkward.
This guy is so bulky. And he's a little bit of a challenge to move.
The Styracosaur had an interesting life because it was supposed to be in Creation, then it was supposed to be in Kong, and finally ended up making it into Son of Kong. Which was great for us because our animators could look at Son of Kong and see exactly how Willis O'Brien animated him. So Son of Kong became our frame of reference for the Styracosaur.
To save precious time, there was always a technician standing by to repair the puppets and do last-minute touch-ups, just as there was when King Kong was produced.
John here is the creature doctor.
between shots, the creature goes back to John for tweaking to make sure it's going to work right for the animator. And he does that by working directly with the person who's actually going to make the creature move. He'll actually dress it for camera, get the paint just right, get the look just right, so they can actually go out and look like it was supposed to look back in 1932. The project ended up being almost an experiment in 1932 visual effects technology, and it really taught us a huge appreciation for what those visual effects artists were doing back then. We had some amazing talent working on this. Great stop motion animators, visual effects artists. It was a cool team. But you take those same filmmakers today, like we did when we reshot these sequences, and you make them shoot visual effects the way they were done in 32, and you instantly appreciate what O'Brien and those guys were doing. It tested us, and if it tested us, it just makes what was done in 1932 that much more heroic.
After weeks of painstaking work, the completed stop-motion animation was sent to the lab. There, each shot was digitally degraded to make it match the quality of the footage shot in 1932. Then, in order to make the brand new scenes, which had no sound, blend seamlessly with the rest of the movie, sound effects had to be created from scratch. In addition to recording human sounds, the engineers created creature sounds by blending and manipulating animal noises, just as Murray Spivak had done in 1932.
The spider was, here in New Zealand we have possums, mini possums, and they hiss and sort of... The octopus creature, I used a little bit of snake and used a little bit of lion cub when it sort of opened its mouth and was sort of...
The signature bellow of the Styracosaur was cleverly borrowed from the film's original soundtrack, using some surprising source material.
I was going through the film trying to, in fact, pull out elements which we could either use or kind of copy.
And the Fay Ray screams came up.
He says, oh, wonder what they'd be like pitched way down.
So that's Fay Ray's scream, and it's just slowed down. And that just sounded like a creature, so she became the Styracosaur.
We were kind of excited about it because it was a great homage to both the film and to Fay Ray.
The final challenge was adding music that would do justice to Max Steiner's breathtaking score.
Fortunately, our lucky break was that we had 20 minutes of Max Steiner's score that were essentially outtakes from the original 1933 score.
Not only did the entire spider pit sequence need music, but also the process of intercutting between brand new chase shots and the original film had opened small gaps in Steiner's score. It was up to the music editor to fill these holes.
You can time stretch and pitch shift things so that they end up in the right key to fill these gaps and to make the music feel as if it was written that way.
All the individual audio elements were brought together in the mix and married with the final picture. At last, the recreation of the lost spider pit sequence was complete.
So, we'll give you a look at what we ended up creating. And this is really, please don't take this in the wrong way, because it's in no way are we claiming that this is exactly what this spider sequence would look like. This is simply us being King Kong fans and purely for fun having a little bit of an imaginative reconstruction of what we would imagine it to have looked like. I wish dream one day that this sequence will be discovered and we'll have a chance to compare it. But in the meantime, have a look at what we created and see if this is what you think that the Lost Spider sequence would be like.
Yeah.